Hello and welcome to Ride Along with Dr. V. Today is episode 4, and what we're going to talk about is what do you do if you stub your toe? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have stubbed my toes many a night, walking to the bathroom in the middle of the night or walking into the room. It's almost like that furniture pops out and just gets in your walking path, right? So, what do you do when that happens? So, what I want to go over in this episode is I want to talk about what do you do immediately after you stub your toe? What do you do the days after? When do you actually need to see a provider for this or a doctor for this? And then how do you prevent it, right? So we're going to go over those 4 things today in episode 4. All right, let's start with number 1. What do you do immediately after you stub your toe? So immediately after you stub your toe, you want to make sure that you actually look at your toe and you want to evaluate it. So many times we stub our toe and we just keep going on about our day and we don't really look at it. So I want you to take some time and actually evaluate your toe. What are you looking for, right? So there's a couple things you want to look for. First, you want to look and see and evaluate the shape of the toe. Has it changed? Was it straight before you stubbed your toe and now it's kind of crooked or leaning to the side? That tells you a lot about the injury itself and how severe it is. The other thing that you want to look at is you want to look at the nail. Is the nail lifted off the toe now? Is there bleeding around the nail or underneath the nail? These are all things that you want to evaluate. And the last thing is you want to look at the skin on your nail. You want to make sure you didn't actually cut yourself or cause an abrasion that formed on the toe. These are all things you want to be aware of and treat immediately if they're there. So, first thing, evaluate the toe. Now, what do you do the days after? So if you evaluate the toe and the toe is still straight, there's no broken skin, there's no damage to your nail, you may have some pain, you're going to have some swelling and some bruising. So in that situation, what you want to do is you want to ice the area, right? So ice is going to be really good. When you do ice, you don't want to put that ice directly on the skin itself. So wrap that in a paper towel or in a washcloth and put it on there for about 5 to 10 minutes. That's going to help calm that inflammation and calm the swelling that you're experiencing in the toe. If you feel unstable with that toe, you can buddy splint it to the toe next to it. But typically ice is going to be the main pain reducer for you. The other thing that you want to evaluate and make sure that you avoid are your shoes, right? So you don't want to wear shoes that have a very pointy toe box. So think a dress shoe, think a cowboy boot with a really pointy toe. What that's going to do is that's going to increase the amount of pressure and friction that's happening on that toe, and it can slow the healing. So be very cautious of the shoes that you wear. You want to be in a shoe with a wide and high toe box while you recover from the injury. The third thing that we want to talk about today is when do you need to see a doctor? So if you experience any of those things that I mentioned in step 1, so the toe shape has changed, there's damage to the nail, there's an open cut on the toe, those are all situations where you really need to be seen by a doctor, especially if you've seen changes to the shape of the toe. Also, if you can't move that toe, there may be a dislocation, there may be a tendon injury, and you may have a fracture. Now, to be honest with you guys, 99% of the toe fractures that I see do not require much intervention like surgery or things like that. But they do need to be evaluated because if you do have a dislocation or a fracture and you don't get that thing placed back into its right position, you can end up with a long-term toe deformity where that toe heals in that crooked position. And then that can lead to problems later on. So again, if you have that toe deformity or that toe shape has changed, you can't move the toe, there's damage to the nail or the skin, you need to get in to see a provider. And especially if you have certain medical conditions like diabetes or poor circulation, I have unfortunately seen someone who stubbed their toe and ended up with a toe amputation. For example, I had a diabetic that stubbed their toe. They didn't realize the skin actually broke open during that injury and they got an infection. And it lingered for too long, and unfortunately, we had to do a toe amputation. So it's really important to evaluate your foot, and especially if you have health conditions, if you have any of those acute changes that we talked about, you need to get into a doctor so they can help you and get you stabilized. Last but not least is prevention. How do we prevent this, right? So the number one thing that you can do to help prevent this is to wear shoes, right? Now, you don't have to have a full-blown athletic style shoe or anything like that, but a good supportive house shoe can work wonders, especially if you have some of those medical conditions that I talked about earlier. So diabetes, poor circulation. So what will happen is, instead of you stubbing that toe and the full blunt of that trauma happening to your toe, the shoe is going to take on some of that, right? So shoes protect your feet. I know when we're at home, we like to be barefoot, but you have to protect your feet, especially if you have those medical conditions I mentioned earlier. The second thing that you can do for prevention is, before you go to bed, especially if you tend to do this at nighttime, make sure that your walk pathways are clear. So if you know you get up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you want to make sure that that furniture is out of the way. There's no cords. There's nothing that is going to get in your way while you're walking to make it easier for you to hurt yourself, trip, fall, or stub your toe. So those are the 4 things that I wanted to talk to you today about in regards to stubbing your toe. If you have questions about your feet, please leave them below in the comments. And if you ever stubbed your toe, I want to hear about that too. So leave that below. And remember, when your feet feel good, everything else gets a little easier.